My name is Felix Schrödinger, and I don't understand jokes. I have a sense of humor, but I don't understand jokes. Especially if someone is the victim of a joke. And especially if I am the victim. And by the way, I have a cat. And like all cats, she loves to climb into boxes and, in fact, into all sorts of containers and confined spaces. I have no idea why. It's just a cat's way. I think you may have heard of Schrödinger's cat, although you may be a little unsure of what that means. Schrödinger, the famous one, not me or my grandfather, was a physicist. He gave his name to a thought experiment in which he placed an imaginary cat in a box with a mechanism that might or might not kill the cat, depending on a random subatomic event. We only know if the cat is alive or dead by opening the box. Until then, the cat is alive and dead at the same time. How you interpret this thought experiment leads to the decision of whether we live in a multiverse or not, so at least from a physics perspective, it's a pretty big deal. Joke often serves as a cover for aggression. When you run into a joker, you will hear, "Don't you understand jokes? I was just joking." Lost your sense of humor? And many other variations on this theme. I worked hard at university because I knew my parents were trying their best to help with their studies while other kids were having fun. And so I became the butt of pranks from rich kids who saw my dedication as some kind of coded criticism. This goes some way to explaining my April Fool's Day allergy. So often he turns out to be extremely unpleasant. Someone tries too hard and is completely uninspired, makes a joke that on any other day would be taken as an invitation to get hit. But on this day, he has a free pass. And if you object, it means you can't take a joke. Okay? And back to my story. These days, you may have heard of me, but at the time these events took place, I was an aspiring biotech entrepreneur. I'm already successful enough to have my own house in a good part of London. It was the first day of April, and a month earlier one could say that everything was perfect. My friend Sarah moved in with me, and my friend said she was perfect for me. I admit that I have a tendency to be a bit stressed, try to plan everything, and have a hard time relaxing. But that is also one of the reasons why I had a house in London before I was 30. They saw that Sarah helped me not take things too seriously. She was funny. I worked quite hard because there was an opportunity to make a major deal with a major pharmaceutical concern to provide them with important precursors for a range of drugs at a fraction of the usual price. This was because we came up with a different way to produce them. I knew that if we made a deal, I would be ready for life, and I was the kind of guy who only proposed to his girlfriend when he was sure he could support her and the family he hoped to have. I already bought a ring, but I was delaying the proposal. Unfortunately, Sarah didn't seem to appreciate it. Fun was important to her, and as far as she was concerned, I wasn't as fun as I used to be. And then her university friend Mark got kicked out of the apartment, and she insisted we let him stay in the spare room, saying it would only take a couple of days. By the 1st of April, he had been there for 2 weeks and seemed to be quite comfortable. Which makes sense since he hasn't paid rent and hasn't yet taken a course on loading and unloading a dishwasher. When he arrived, I didn't ask him for anything, since it was only supposed to be for a couple of days. Oddly enough, although he irritated me to no end, I did not see him as a competitor in the romantic sense. No ambition, immature, lacks manners, uncultured, proud of his ignorance. Hope you get the picture. On top of that, Sarah assured me that they were never in a relationship, and to be honest, I'm pretty sure she wasn't lying. The job was done. The contract was signed, dated Friday the 1st of April, and I could move forward with our plans. For the first time in a long time, I left work at 4. I told my secretary Gail that I was leaving. She asked if I was heading home, which in retrospect was strange because she never usually asked me that, but I didn't pay any attention to it at the time. I had plans for the evening. I had plans, and they definitely didn't include Mark. He could spend his time watching mindless reality TV as usual. We'll go to a fancy restaurant. And at some point I will take out a small box, get down on one knee, and ask a question. So I saw that evening, but, as one famous German general said, No plan survives contact with the enemy. Items of intimate clothing in the hall and on the stairs. Sounds coming from above. There were 11 steps, and each of them seemed to be a meter high. I made it to the top, and he stood facing the door of our bedroom. All I had to do was reach in and open it. I vomited, quietly and without warning, and suddenly, I could think. I turned and walked down the stairs. Strangely, it seemed quiet upstairs, although I was pretty sure they couldn't hear me. I wrote a short note in the kitchen. When I get back, Mark better leave, otherwise his next home will be a hospital ward. You also need to find somewhere else to live. I went out, got into the car, and drove to the Venus Bar. I parked, walked in, and ordered myself a Diet Coke. I only drink alcohol when I'm happy, not when I need to think. The Venus Bar caters mostly to the dregs of humanity, or so it seems. Oddly enough, it's in a rather posh part of London, but it doesn't suit the decor or the visitors. That's why I go there in difficult times. It gives me perspective. After a few minutes, I started to see the positives. On some level, I already felt that something was wrong. That's why I didn't propose to her sooner. At least we weren't married yet. It's strange, but what outraged me most at that moment was not infidelity, not disrespect, but stupidity. Besides, I wondered what the hell she saw in Mark. I know I looked at him through a man's eyes, but I don't think he was particularly handsome. He didn't keep himself in shape like I did, despite my workload, and he certainly wasn't dapper, and he didn't have any prospects. These were my thoughts as I sat there. Then she entered the bar. Gorgeous. Dressed elegantly and sexy. High black heels. What I was almost sure of were stockings, not pantyhose. It was completely out of place at the Venus Bar, and I knew it. All these sneaky guys turned their heads like crocodiles on the riverbank, ready to slide into the water, grab the tempting calf, and drag it under the water. She put the phone to her ear and spoke venomously. Joke? April Fool? I can't believe you did this to me, knowing how I feel about it. It was clear that tears were about to flow. Will you be here in half an hour? And what should I do now? I don't even have any money or cards because you took them out of my wallet? Her voice became incredulous. Should I ask someone to buy me a drink? Here? At that moment, she broke down and ended the conversation. Now she just stood there, not knowing what to do. I didn't know that I was going to interfere. I'm sorry? She shuddered. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, and I have a proposal. She turned and looked at me with understandable suspicion. Then she did something like a double take. You look somehow familiar. Have we already met? Now it was I who was caught off guard, and I responded with spontaneous honesty. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I would remember you. You are beautiful. She blushed slightly, and before she could answer, I added, I'm Felix Schrödinger. She smiled, and it was the most charming smile I've ever seen. Wow, it's clear. I saw your photo today. You are the owner of Mendel's Garden, aren't you? My editor wanted me to find out if you got that huge contract everyone's talking about with Paradise Pharmaceuticals. I was amazed that I was getting so much attention. I'm April Fuller. I just started working at the Financial Times, sort of on probation. I was glad that she was at least open to talking to me. I wanted to invite you to go to the nearby bar of the Regency Hotel. It's a little more decent than this, and then you won't be here when it shows up. She smiled, but then became a little worried. As you probably heard, I don't have any money with me. I laughed. Well, it just so happens that after signing a certain deal today, I can afford to have a couple of drinks. April grinned and nodded. I turned to the bartender, put a tenner on the bar, much more than my Diet Coke cost, and said, keep the change, and when the guy comes and asks about the lady, just tell him that she left with a rich guy in a suit. You can do it? He winked at us and said, certainly. I hope he gets the joke. We went to a nearby bar. It amused me that the Venus Bar could be adjacent to a 4-star hotel. The bar at the Regency was perfect for private conversations, and we sat in a semi-closed booth. We ordered coffee. So, Felix, how did it happen that you ended up in a place like the Venus Bar alone, especially when it seems like you have something to celebrate? I realized that this must seem strange to her. Well, for me, it's a kind of tradition. When things go wrong, I go and sit at the Venus Bar and people watch, and I soon realize that my life is much better than most of the people there, no matter what temporary grief I'm going through. I guess it's some kind of therapy. April looked puzzled. I thought you said you had entered into an agreement. I laughed mirthlessly. Well, I was heading home at 4 o'clock this afternoon, planning to celebrate with my girlfriend and maybe even propose to her. At 4:30, I listened to her already celebrating with her ex-boyfriend. I explained what happened and what led up to it. And then my phone rang. It was Sarah. Sorry, April, but I guess I should answer. She's already tried several times. I took a deep breath and clicked on the icon. For some reason, I turned on the speakerphone. I guess I wanted April to know that I wasn't making up what I told her. Felix, thank God I caught you. It was just a joke. We didn't really do anything. If you walked into the bedroom, you would see this. I didn't know you would react this way. Just come back and we'll explain everything. Suddenly, I felt completely calm. There was no longer any conflict within me because I had made a decision. For starters, forget we. Your fucking friend better be gone by the time I get back. He's been living in my house rent-free for 2 weeks without even thanking me, unless you count today. But Felix. And you better find another place to live as soon as possible. But Felix, you got it all wrong. It was just a joke, an April Fool's joke. Not really. Sarah, how about a little thought experiment? Try to imagine telling someone this story and convincing them that you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, why don't you try it for real? Tell someone how you were in our bedroom with your ex-boyfriend, making all the sounds that come with passionate sex, but that it was all completely innocent. This time, there was a short pause. Felix, it's not like that at all. April surprised me by picking up the phone and speaking into it. Hey, Sarah, we can start this experiment right now. I just heard your story and you certainly didn't convince me. Another pause on the other end of the line. Who are you? April grinned. I'm just a girl that Felix picked up at a bar and asked out for a drink. I guess you could say that we both don't understand jokes. Then I took the phone and hung up. We looked at each other and laughed, and then April said, You know, Felix, the funny thing is that I have the feeling that she's telling the truth. She looked at me thoughtfully. I know. I have the same feeling, but I'm sure it doesn't matter. It was clear that she understood and agreed, and I was happy that she didn't have to explain. Okay, April. One good turn deserves another. You asked about the contract. She smiled and said, Listen, Felix, I don't want to take advantage of you. Please don't tell me anything you shouldn't. Oh, don't worry about it. They had already agreed that it could be made public and left it to me. Our company is not listed on the stock market, so there are no problems with stock price manipulation. I was going to wait until Monday to issue a press release, but there's nothing stopping it from coming sooner, and the contract itself has to be in the public domain due to EU competition rules. She looked interested. Give me your email address, April. She did so, and I sent her a scan of the signed contract. Why don't you call your editor and write a note? Her eyes lit up. You are sure? I mean, it would really help me. Certainly. I'm not going anywhere. Can you dictate a note over the phone? She nodded. Then act, she called the editor. Hey, Reg, this is April. You asked me to find out about the deal with Mendel's Garden. She turned on the speakerphone. Okay, do you have anything? Yes, I can confirm that the contract was signed today for 3 2/10 million euros. I think having years of experience meant he was careful. Sounds tempting, April. But do you have any proof? Maybe someone is just playing games here. No, I have an impeccable source. I just sent you a scan of the contract. There was a very short pause. Then he came back, sounding a little worried. Well, it looks genuine, but how did you get it? I mean, there could be legal issues. At that moment, I picked up the phone. Hello, Reg. This is Felix Schrödinger, owner of Mendel's Garden. We'll post a selfie of me and April in a minute to prove I'm not an imposter and everything is fine. I was going to wait until Monday to tell her the news, but we met by chance and April talked me into telling her the details. We asked the waiter to take a photo of us at the table, and we sent the photo to the editor. She then dictated her story over the phone, which took surprisingly little time, and impressed me with how she was able to organize her thoughts and construct a coherent article without pen and paper. Intelligence can be very sexy. When she finished, she laughed and said, "Well, things are definitely looking up. I feel much better." Just at that moment, her phone rang. The name Dan appeared on the screen. Crap. I guessed it was her boyfriend. After some hesitation, she picked up the phone and also put it on speakerphone. "Yes? Hi, baby. Where are you?" "At the bar. Having a drink, as you suggested." "Okay. Tell me where it is and I'll come and get you." "No." "What do you mean, baby? Are you mad at me?" "This was just a joke." "Oh, I'm not angry anymore. I'm having a great time with Felix." "Who is Felix?" "Oh, I see. You're just fooling me." "No, Dan. Felix is a lovely man who took me to a much nicer bar and bought me a drink. And now, my birthday is starting to make me happy." Wow. So it was her birthday. He did this to her on her birthday, April 1st. Her parents named her April, and I thought that everything was bad with me. "Hey, baby, I understand. Maybe I went too far this time. Just tell me where you are." His voice began to sound a little whiny. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Dan. This is Felix. We'll probably eat something now and celebrate April's birthday in style. Do not wait." I wondered if I had gone too far and half expected April to intervene, but she was clearly pleased. "Hey, April, stop it. You've already had your fun." Now she took my phone away from me. "What's the matter, Dan? Don't you understand jokes? See you later. Or maybe in the morning." She ended the call and then did something complicated with her phone. "What are you doing?" "I'm blocking his number. I can't turn off my phone yet because of work. They might need something." When I mentioned inviting her to a birthday dinner, I didn't think much of it, but she took me seriously, and I decided I was more than happy with the idea. It took me 2 minutes to make a reservation at a nearby reputable French restaurant. Now she was clearly a little worried. "Look, Felix, I feel a little awkward about this. And you might feel awkward inviting a journalist to dinner, so I'll understand if—" I laughed. "How about I just invite April, a smart and interesting woman I'd like to get to know better, to dinner? And in the interest of full disclosure, she's also quite attractive and dressed incredibly sexy, and if you're not happy with that, I'd understand if—" Now she laughed. "In that case, I would be happy to go to dinner with a person who knows how to be smart and sensitive without being a weakling. And in the interest of full disclosure, he's also the cliché tall, dark, and handsome stranger, and he looks really good in a suit, so lead the way." Walking into the restaurant with April on my arm, I couldn't help but notice that many men's attention was immediately focused on her. It may have been a more posh clientele, but the reality was not much different from the scruffy guys at the Venus bar. The food was wonderful, even if the waiter was a bit pretentious. But it didn't matter, as we both felt the same way. We sat down at 7, and suddenly it turned out to be 10. We talked so casually and laughed so freely, and then it became clear that while they were patient, they needed a table. Throughout the evening, our hands involuntarily touched more than once, and more often. I found myself looking into her beautiful bluish-green eyes and physically reacting to the way she modestly lowered her eyes and then raised them again, and even once or two bites his lower lip, which I was sure was not intentionally seductive, but all the more exciting because it was unconscious. April's expression suddenly became serious, and she said, "I had such a wonderful evening. This is the best birthday I've ever had, and I have to admit that the thought of going back to the apartment and seeing Dan is really depressing." I felt the same way. I knew I'd have to deal with Sarah if she was still there, but the thought of that confrontation was guaranteed to taint my memories of the evening. "Okay, so what if I book us a couple of rooms at the Regency, so we can sleep here and deal with shit in the morning? I hoped that by emphasizing the two-room aspect, she would understand that I was not trying to force myself on her. We had just left the restaurant when she suddenly stopped on the sidewalk and pulled me towards her. Looking into my eyes, she said, "You're not going to stay with Sarah, are you?" I didn't even have to think about it. God, no. Fine. And I'm done with Dan. I wondered where this was going, starting to feel the stirring of something that I couldn't yet identify, but that made me feel much more alive than I had in a long time. "But Felix, you've already spent more than enough money." I wanted to object, but she continued. "So let's save money and rent only one room." I think my smile said it all. Then she put her hands on my neck and pulled me towards her upturned face, saying, "And I think it's time for me to get the birthday kiss I've been dreaming about all evening. Since the invention of the kiss, there have been 5 kisses that were considered the most passionate, the purest. This one left them all behind. Neither of us had words for what we felt. We walked to the hotel in silence, my jacket draped over her shoulders to protect her from the evening chill, and I hugged her. At the hotel reception, April didn't feel the need to keep distance between us, rather proudly showing through her body language that she was with me. I splashed out on a rather luxurious room. Why not? I just signed a contract worth millions. At first, we just looked around like children in a fairy tale. Then I turned to April and said, "I know that today is your birthday, but can I unwrap my gift?" Suddenly feeling a little embarrassed, she nodded. I was in no hurry. At first, I just took my jacket from her. Then I stood back a little to look at her in her elegant dark green dress. The material looked and felt like silk. "You look so amazing, so beautiful and so sexy. I can't believe this is happening." She smiled shyly, not knowing what to say, but clearly enjoying the compliment. I didn't say anything, but I thought Dan had really screwed up. He'll never find another woman who can compare to April. I then walked up to her and stood behind her to slowly unzip her. In the silence of the room, I could hear her uneven breathing. It took all my self-control not to rush. I wanted to capture every second of this experience in my memory, convinced that life would never again be able to offer me something so sublime. I let the dress fall to the floor at her feet. It may indeed have been silk, as it behaved almost like a liquid rather than a fabric. "I really hope you like neck kisses, April. Because I'm going to kiss you." I felt her shudder. "I love kisses on the neck, but I think you can kiss me anywhere." I kissed her neck, enjoying how soft, smooth, and warm it felt under my lips. I let go of her bra and pulled it off her shoulders. Standing behind her, I reached out my arms to cup her breasts. I felt them before I saw them, and they fit perfectly in my palms. I know that my breasts are not very big. Like every woman, she had her doubts, and, as in many cases, they were absurd. I shocked her by suddenly turning her face towards me. "Stop!" She looked at me a little shocked. "April, everything you said tonight was so smart, so true, so funny and completely fair in every way, so please don't ruin it now by saying something stupid. Your breasts are perfect. Get out of your shoes, April." The truth was that I liked seeing her in stiletto heels and stockings, but her feet were bound to ache after an evening spent in them, and I wanted it to be just for her pleasure. She did as I asked. Now April spoke. "Felix, I don't think I can undress you quickly, and I desperately need you. Please take off your clothes as quickly as possible. I need you." She didn't have to ask me twice. Once I was naked, she surprised me by kneeling in front of me. "April, there's no need." Before I could continue, she replied, "No, but I want to. I'm not submissive. Not a bit. At least that's what I thought. But with you, Felix. Never before had any woman worshipped me as she did that night, and I've never felt so welcome." I pulled her to her feet, hugged her, and kissed her deeply, pushing my tongue between her lips. Although she didn't seem particularly small, I found that I had no trouble picking her up. Perhaps it was the strength of my desire that made me stronger than usual. I lifted her onto the bed, leaving her dainty, little stockinged legs hanging over the edge. For a while afterwards, we just lay there, too exhausted to do anything more than caress each other, looking into each other's eyes. We were going to take a shower, but ended up falling asleep, sweaty and smelling strongly of sex. I barely had the strength to pull the blanket over us and turn off the night lights. In the morning, we took a shower. We had sex in the shower, then I asked for breakfast to be brought to the room and we spent a decadent time feeding each other in bed, which turned out to be quite messy, and my conscience made me leave a big tip for the cleaning staff. When she turned on her phone, she received several messages from the editor. Her scoop made the front page and was published under her name, and she was given a permanent position. The last message made us both laugh. It was from Reg, asking if she could get me to do an interview. We then went our separate ways to attend to the less pleasant activities that awaited us, but already happy in the knowledge that we would see each other in the evening to celebrate April's promotion. That morning I returned home at 10:30. I wondered if I would have to physically evict Mark, but as it turns out, he left. I walked in to find Sarah sitting at the dining room table in the living room, sipping coffee. She didn't look too good, and it occurred to me that, despite the lengthy lovemaking with April, I might have slept more than she did. "Thank God you're here, Felix. Now we can work things out." I went and poured myself some coffee. At that moment, it dawned on me that I couldn't remember her ever making or pouring coffee for me. I walked over and sat down at the table, sitting at the opposite end. "Where were you last night, Felix?" I was amused that, for some reason, she felt entitled to ask me questions. However, I indulged her. "I stayed at the hotel." "One?" "No, I spent the night with April. Just saying her name made me feel warm, but obviously it didn't have the same effect on Sarah." "How could you do this, Felix? What about us?" I tilted my head slightly to the side, as if I was examining a particularly exotic beetle. "Sarah, I think we ended yesterday more precisely, a little after 4. She looked at me with disappointment. "But I told you, Felix. It was just a joke. If you opened the door." She really didn't understand. "Sarah, do you know this whole story with Schrödinger's cat?" She looked at me, not understanding what was happening. "Yes, of course, you explained everything to me. How you open the box to see if the cat is alive or dead, but I don't see what this has to do with the matter. Besides everything else, you didn't open the door. It's a shame you didn't do it then." I stopped her. "No. In fact, of the matter. I didn't need to open the door. I saw that she still didn't understand. If I had opened the door, I might have seen both of you naked on our bed." Her disappointment showed again. "But I told you, Felix, that you couldn't see it because it wasn't there. If you ask your secretary Gail, she'll tell you how I told her to let me know when you were heading home. I wouldn't do this if it were real." I continued, as if she hadn't said anything. "Or another possibility was that I would have walked up those stairs, tormented by these sounds. I would have opened the door only to see you two, fully clothed, far apart, laughing at me and saying, 'April Fool's fool.'" Finally, she fell silent. "You see, Sarah, I didn't open the door because I didn't need to." Either way, our relationship was dead. On the 1st of April, 4 years later, I watched April emerge from the infinity pool, a looming silhouette against the background of sunset. She's expecting our first child, and the bump is just starting to show. It became our custom to leave at the end of March and return at the beginning of April, without telling anyone where we were going. I'm too young to retire, even though I can easily afford it. Now I only work when I want, and I look forward to being fully involved in raising our children. I recently learned from a then-girlfriend that I was probably the only person who believed Sarah when she said she didn't cheat on me with Mark. Even her own mother didn't believe her. I guess you could say it was a joke on her, but I don't think she found it funny. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.